why atheism is stupid.
Wait. You think that atheism is stupid? Aside from the fact that you are definitely not going to prove either of those things, there are two major problems. One, considering that you called the video "Is Atheism Stupid?" and then put in a title card of "Atheism is Stupid," and now you are making the same implied statement a third time? Well, at the very least, it looks like you are the master of being redundant. Second, considering the rest of this video and the thing that you wrote in your description, I feel that think might be a little bit too charitable to apply to anything you say. I mean, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you do type will be used as evidence against you. Aside from the fact that you forgot to write "to" in there, I think you have also failed to realise that the same premise also applies to you. And oh boy, is it going to apply hard. Good job.
Now, firstly, the very premise of atheism is illogical in the highest degree, based on the fact it stems from the lack of proof of a creator implies there's no creator.
Speaking of good job, way to start by catastrophically failing to explain what atheism means to basically anyone, which is already ironic enough for something that you're calling stupid. While the staggering lack of evidence pointing to a creator is indeed one of the many things that atheists might mention when it comes to their not believing in the God-mans, to act like it's the only or even the main thing that makes one atheist is a strong demonstration that you have never actually spoken to any atheist. It is far simpler than that. It is essentially a rejection of the claims of theists. That is, you say that there's a God, and I say, I don't believe you. You try, and fail, to make a strong case for one. I reject that case, more than likely because it was garbage. And on we go. Your inability to provide evidence will just be one of many reasons we find your claims uncompelling, to put it nicely, and idiotic nonsense to put it, correctly.
And this completely fails to take into account that the very fact we exist and the complexity in which we exist is in itself the evidence.
Well, given that atheism doesn't need to take anything other than one's own belief in the existence of deities into account, even if we grant that complexity and existence in any way points toward an all-powerful creator man who did the things on purpose because he wanted to, it is really tenuous evidence at best, and absolutely god-awful at its ironic most likeliness. The existence of stuff doesn't mean anyone made it. The vast majority of distinct things that exist on Earth, not one of them was made with anything resembling intent. They are the result of processes and pressures, and that scale gets even more lopsided when it is applied to the universe itself. It only ever demonstrates what you think it does because you assume that there is a creator at all. When you don't, then it appears as though one isn't necessary, so why would you come to that completely unneeded conclusion at all? Apologists really do need to get it through their heads. Presupposition is not proof.
So to a certain degree, it's not where is the evidence, everything is the evidence.
I could be wrong, but if everything is evidence for your claim, basically nothing is. But fine, even if that were the case, even if everything in the universe could be used as evidence for Magic McGee, that again does not make it good evidence. Good evidence needs to be something that points most strongly toward the conclusion you think it does. If it points nowhere, or to something else entirely, or vaguely could be used but something else makes far more sense overall than your thing, then suddenly it's less like everything points to God and more like everything points to many possible ideas, and God is way the hell down on that list.
An example being, you see a building, like a McDonald's in Camberwell, or some other rudimentary building, and you think to yourself, I don't know who built that building. This doesn't naturally lead to the conclusion that the building has no builder due to the fact of your inability to know who built it.
One of these days, the last theist ever is going to make an argument for God that uses the watchmaker fallacy, and no one will ever do so again. And that will have nothing to do with the fact that the next second that the universe has exploded, because they will never stop using this idiotic goddamn argument. But no, that's not how that works. We know where buildings come from. We know that people build them. We also know where things that aren't man-made come from. We have, in fact, heavily studied the universe around us, so we can figure out where things come from. And again, it was, in fact, processes and not people that cause all the stuff to come to be. At no point have we seen any reason to believe that something that forms naturally needed someone to cause that. So we have no reason to conclude that. And I think that the only reason you do is because you want that to be the case. And that's not a good reason to believe anything.
Actually, that due to its complexity, it must have had a builder. If that's the case, the universe being infinitely more complex than a building, must also have a creator.
That's not how that works, buddy. For one, buildings aren't actually all that complex, not compared to some things that exist. 4 walls and a roof, and you got yourself a building. Hell, you don't even need the walls, and it would still be some sort of shelter with a builder. But you could compare that to a cave, which could have essentially at least 3 walls and an entrance, and suddenly the thing built by a person versus the thing formed in nature, their complexities by your standard are reversed. And yes, I know your dumbass probably thinks that God built the caves, but the point is that he didn't have to. And so if shelter can exist without a person building it specifically for that, well, scale that up, and ultimately there's no reason that the biggest, most complex thing would necessarily have to have been built either.
Even the idea of the Big Bang, I mean, the universe having a beginning, a relatively new idea for scientists who before that, were proponents of the infinite past theorem, as it were.
Well, shock and or horror that he obviously doesn't know what the Big Bang is. No, the Big Bang is not and has never referenced the beginning of the universe. It's the expansion of energy and subsequently matter that happened after the universe started. Or didn't, because we literally don't know what happened before the Big Bang, and you definitely don't know because you don't even know what it is. And relatively new as compared to what exactly? The idea it's based on literally turns 100 years old next year. There are PlayStation 1 games younger than that, and everybody knows that thing was created at the beginning of time to give us the most glorious boot-up sound that ever existed. And it's more that they thought that the universe was static rather than specifically infinite. Because again, the Big Bang shows that the universe has been changing, not telling us exactly when it started or that it did at all.
So you got a situation where after getting over that big hurdle of thinking everything that is always was here, you've got a situation where there's a beginning. You've been created. It always seems to just turn into an emotional argument, a value judgment based debate where it's, do you like the idea there's a creator? Is it palatable? Does it tickle you? Does it make you feel warm and fuzzy inside?
Okay, first, it is absolutely hilarious that your camera's autofocus kicked off as soon as you started talking about feeling fuzzy to, in fact, make you look fuzzy. And there is just no way that could possibly be an artistic choice, but is obviously an ironically hilarious presentation failure. And second, the feeling that one is or isn't created has absolutely nothing to do with atheism and whether or not it's true, or the reason anyone is an atheist. I'm an atheist because I don't believe that any of the gods that any human has ever posited are real, due to the unfortunate fact that they all fail to sound even remotely convincing. The only feeling involved in that conclusion is the disappointment I feel whenever a humans decides they really need to tell me something dumb.
I mean, that's not important. I mean, it doesn't matter how much you like the idea. The question is it true? Now, how do you weigh that up?
It is ironic that he's accusing atheists of taking an emotional response as an answer to whether or not we were created, when almost every theist I have ever spoken to hates the idea that they were not created, and that it wasn't for some specific super special purpose. And hell, many atheists are actually not too jazzed about the idea either, since even for those atheists, the idea of deliberate purpose sounds nice, but they usually accept that it's probably not true. Ironically, those atheists are seemingly far more cognizant when wanting something is not the same as making it true. But the thing is, the counter to that feeling isn't usually disliking the idea that someone made them, but that we just kind of don't give a shit. It's not super important either way. The only thing that tends to matter is what the facts are and whether or not we can prove them.
I mean, firstly, assuming that by the biggest, most massive, humongous, ridiculous, preposterous fluke, everything that is came into existence is dumb.
Well, speaking of dumb assumptions, assuming that that's what atheists think or say about the universe is in fact really freaking dumb. There are a ton of hypothetically plausible explanations for how and why the universe came to be the way it is, or if it even had a beginning at all. But even if most atheists did think that everything is simply a cosmic fluke, what makes you think that it is dumb other than you don't like the idea that it is? I'm going to guess no reason, because if the universe is just a great big accident, then that's what the universe is. Doesn't matter how stupid you might think it is. And hell, the universe contains apologists, so it's already pretty damn silly.
Just based on the fact that, you couldn't believe less than that, but swallow the idea that there's more. For example, you wouldn't believe me if I said that, the British Library is a result of an explosion at a printing factory, yet believe an explosion created every single thing that is and ever was.
That's the other one that's never going to happen. Internet apologists actually bothering to learn what the Big Bang says instead of just running with some dipshit who doesn't really know what it is told them one time. These guys are just allergic to being correct, I swear to atheismo. No, the Big Bang is not an explosion, it's an expansion. And the things that came after the Big Bang are the result of, again, processes, not the expansion itself necessarily. But hell, even if that was an accurate explanation of the Big Bang, then in fact the library would be the result of an explosion. The one at the beginning of everything, you dumbass. That would still be a causal chain and absolutely would count.
And that will continue to be. I mean, it doesn't make sense. At the same time, the whole idea of common descent, badly called evolution, but the idea of common descent, where we all used to come from an amoeba, some pond scum somewhere, evolved into all the life that exists today, based on the similarities between life forms, which is ridiculous.
And surprisingest of surprises, he doesn't understand what thing one about evolution is either. What a shonk. Evolution is an observed phenomenon that we understand for far, far more in-depth reasons than simply some things are kind of similar, you absolute galaxy melt. The only truly ridiculous thing in this video is the man sat here dismissing vast swaths of scientific understanding because he hasn't actually bothered to learn about it. I will never understand that particular common theist compulsion. When I don't understand something, I look into it. When I think something is wrong, I check why. And sometimes I'll find out that I'm wrong. But these guys, they take minimal information and understanding, and that's it. That is enough to go online and make a giant tit of themselves. And then when everybody makes fun of them, they almost universally bitch about being attacked or unfairly maligned, but never ever ever think to themselves, maybe I should actually learn something about the things I talk about. No, learning is for us dumb atheists and science enjoyers, I guess.
Just because I have a nose, you have a nose, doesn't mean we have the same mom and dad. It's a very just wishy-washy, guess-based, conjecture-based hypothesis.
Calling a heavily studied, factually grounded science that has not only been demonstrated time and time again, but also supports endless levels of profoundly useful medical science, amongst all sorts of other stuff. Wishy-washy conjecture, when your entire worldview is literally constructed out of actual wishy-washy, nonsensical conjecture from people who literally had no idea how anything works. Well, it's a little galling, not gonna lie. Also, the you have a nose, I have a nose thing doesn't mean that we have the same parents, yes, but that's not the claim, dipshit. The claim is common ancestry. which, while technically parents are ancestors, common ancestors tend to go back a few generations. Do you think that just because we both have noses, that would mean that there isn't some ancient guy that we both could be related to? It is like you are trying to sound as dumb as possible. And if you are, congratulations, you are doing that exceptionally well.
Then you go on to the law of probability, which is bloody stupid. You know, on an infinite time stream, everything is possible. I mean, if I stamp my feet 3 times, at no point will my foot turn into a rabbit. I mean, it's not gonna happen. I mean, I can stamp my feet infinitely. It will never turn into a rabbit. I mean, my foot will still remain to be my foot. It might be damaged, a swollen foot, but it's still going to be a foot. It's not going to change into a combine harvester.
Well, that's fair. A thing that no one has ever claimed is how it works will never happen. He has got us. Same way that no matter how much moldy tofu you stuff into your ears, it's never going to turn into a functional brain. Now, if you actually understood, well, anything would be nice, but the nature of infinity, it's not that if you take one random action in a universe with the same rules as ours, that it could have literally any and also somehow instant possible result, when no, that's not what it means. It's that all possible results can happen on an infinite timescale. Your foot isn't going to change into a rabbit by stamping it 3 times, but if it fell off and entered the food chain, it's entirely possible that its constituent parts could end up making up another creature's biomass. It's not even that hard. They would just have to eat it. And then, boom, your foot is now quite literally part of a tiger. But yeah, given infinite time, everything will likely do and be all the things that it is possible for those things to be and do. Just because you don't understand it doesn't make that not true. Also, it's funny that you're telling us that magical things can never happen when your whole deal relies on literal magic. In a world where your foot can never turn into a rabbit, I guess God isn't all powerful then.
I mean, you just don't get a situation like that happening. But what you get is people switch off their brains, man. No one's asking no damn questions.
Ah, the irony! It burns! Yeah, they make videos that are in black and white for no explicable reason, talking about subjects they don't understand and yet assume they know basically everything they could need to know about, and then choose to admonish others for not asking questions when they haven't asked, say, could I be wrong about this? Or, is this a really stupid argument? Or most pressingly, was it a good idea for me to stick that fork into that outlet? No, but only because you didn't let go and thus completely melted what was left of your tofu brain. At least that stuff could have made you an above average apologist.
So everyone switched off their brain. They said, okay, our new pope is going to be this dude in the lab coat. And because I was in school and that guy's talking about covalent bonds and entropy and exothermic reactions, I'm just going to swallow every massive paracetamol the size of my head that he chucks my way.
Well, there's no way that's not just a giant admission that he struggled with science class. They use big words and I don't understand. That means they're bad. Shut up, you tart. No one is worshipping the scientists. Certainly not the ones from their schools. They aren't the Pope of atheism or anything like that. You are just mad that you got an F in science class and assumed it's because you were too smart. Instead of realizing the likely truth, you're a massive, irredeemable dumbass.
It don't make no kind of sense. So if you just slow down and you think to yourself, you look around, everything that's complicated had this design. Now, if you come outside of me and you see a puddle of urine, I agree with you. There's no designer behind it. There's no one who sat down painstakingly planned the path the urine was gonna flow down. But I mean, you come to me and you see an iPhone. Like, I'm not gonna accept from you that this is the result of just some random collaboration or mishmash of circumstance. It's bloody ridiculous.
Okay, of course. The irony again of you telling people to think is simply amazing. And also the idea that even if you had a brain, it could function any slower seems pretty unlikely. Because your puddle of piss analogy, it almost gets you where you need to be, but you immediately swerve directly into a cesspool. Yeah, things can happen without design, and are pretty different from things that happen with design. But the difference is always intention. And while the piss idea isn't great for an example without intention, I'm sure they meant to piss somewhere. It was never likely a part of some grand scheme to make that shop door reek till the next rain or whatever. But the iPhone is made by a company that wants to sell them. And we know that people make things to sell. But who's making rocks or rivers or clouds? Again, I'm pretty sure you'll say God, but then why do those features appear on other planets? So far away that the only reason we can tell is through inference. And why are most of those only knowable because they're close enough to tell? And yet the vast majority of the universe is completely hidden in that regard. You might argue grand design, but it seems far more likely that instead of infinite wasted effort to impress some morons on a slightly damp rock, it appears far more likely that instead the universe formed and humans just happened to spawn on that particular piece of cosmic dust. Because if all this was intentional, it's the most ridiculously roundabout way of doing anything in the history of ever, and makes even less sense than your ironically piss poor analogy. Although at least it's on theme for the rest of the video.